Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. So Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 12th of May 2024. Let's get straight to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply, of course. And we can see that there are some fairly high numbers in a few of these categories. 1,260 personnel lost is a huge number there, and that probably indicates that the Russians are attacking in a number of places, notably, of course, Kharkiv Oblast in the north of Ukraine, where the Russians are attacking from Belgorod. They will be, no doubt, incurring a number of casualties on their side, as well as in places like Chasiv Yar, northern Avdiivka salient, where that has been quite costly for the Russians with some counterattacks from the Ukrainians. Then we've got Krasnohorivka and all these other places, Novomykolivka area, etc., etc. So the Russians are attacking in a number of places, and that will translate into a higher higher number of Russians killed or wounded. 5 tanks is certainly lower than we have seen. 22 armoured personnel vehicles is a fairly high number. 30 artillery systems likewise. 2 multiple launch rocket systems and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. Don't know what that is. Andrew Perpetua hasn't got his list out again, so that's 2 days been without that. I feel somewhat lost. 64 vehicles and fuel tanks to be added to the lists today with, that's a big old number. 2 pieces of special equipment as well. So a little bit up and down with those stats, but a costly day in terms of personnel, that's for sure. Artillery systems and APVs too, both above average. So that's that. We have not, as mentioned, seen Andrew Perpetua's list for a couple of days. So we'll go on to just look at a few significant, notable points, I think. This one I meant to talk about like 4-5 date or whenever it happened, but May the 3rd. But I forgot, basically. Russian officers killed in Ukraine project has discovered an obituary for Colonel Denis Lapin. If you remember Lapin, I think Lapin was his father. So this is the son. Lapin Senior, I'm sure, was he awarded something after Butcher? Or was it after Kharkiv and he got an award and it's like, no. Anyway, the Russian officers killed in Ukraine project has discovered this obituary for Colonel Denis Lapin. According to the obituary, Lapin was eliminated by a HIMARS strike on the headquarters on May the 3rd. Lapin is a rather remarkable person. He is a son of Colonel General Alexander Lapin. Lapin Sr. in 2022 commanded the Center Group of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation and was also Deputy Commander of all occupation forces, after which he was removed from his position and sent to defend Belgorod. Lapin Sr. awarded his son the order after a failed offensive in the Chernihiv region at the beginning of the full-scale war. It's known that Lapin Jr. lost about 3/4 of the tank regiment entrusted to him near Chernihiv. Despite the losses, Lapin Jr. continued to command the regiment, but now he has also suffered a natural end for all occupiers. So, yeah, and I'm sure his father got awards for after Butcher and was involved in that. So, yeah, a bit of an infamous family, but his son being taken out, I guess, is fairly significant there. Quote, "We need you more than your country and command. You were sent to zero, and for us, you are an exchange fund." End quote. The 3rd Assault Brigade captured the deputy company commander and the senior sergeant of the 752nd Regiment of the Russian Forces. It's reported that this happened at the village of Ryarodka, so that's up on the northeastern axis in the Luhansk region during an attempt to storm Ukrainian positions. Fighters of the 2nd Mechanized Battalion eliminated 28 invaders, but these 2 were quite lucky. So quite a high ranking POW there. Just goes to show that the Ukrainians, I've seen more POW videos in the last couple of weeks than I had done for the last few months. Again, when you start seeing stuff like this, it's always about building up a narrative. What is going on? So for me, this means that normally you get POWs when you attack positions and you take over trench lines. But we know that the Ukrainians aren't really doing that. So these appear to be failed Russian attacks. And what does that kind of say? Interesting. That maybe the Ukrainians are well dug in, so that Russian attacks are not not coming up with the required outcomes. I don't know. Okay, we have a Russian claim here concerning. Oh no, actually, this is a Ukrainian claim about a Russian attack. But we're going to talk about sort of lack of vehicles again, the use of suboptimal vehicles, but then actually, are those suboptimal vehicles actually optimal? And this is that question I keep asking, which is there good value to using things like golf carts and motorcycles? This is a brigade commander telling AFP, so Agence France Presse, earlier this month that Russian forces were employing unusual tactics to advance, including off-road motorcycles. These vehicles helped Russian forces, quote, breach our positions during one advance, as their, quote, speed and maneuverability played in their favour. So let's see what the quote is here. A brigade commander told AFP earlier this month that Russian forces were employing unusual tactics to advance, including off-road motorcycles. These vehicles helped Russian forces breach our positions during one advance as the speed of their maneuverability played in their favour. Ukraine has so far managed to resist Russian attacks to the east and north of Chasiv Yar, but Russian troops have advanced from the south in recent days. In order to take the city, however, they would have to cross a dried-up canal 6 meters in depth and 30 meters in width. The brigade commander said Russian tactics were always the same: aerial bombardment followed by artillery barrages and assaults with armoured vehicles and infantry despite heavy losses. However, it appears that they are using motorcycles possibly effectively there. Being able to maybe breach or seeking to breach that canal around the Donbass canal around Chasiv Yar. Well, here we've got an image. And this is a question I've been asking myself: is are motorcycles susceptible to mines? And the thing is, there are so many different ways of triggering mines. They're not just all about weight and pressure going downwards. You have all sorts of different triggers, magnetic, metal, or sensors from the side, all sorts of stuff. But here we do have, I can't show it to you, but we've got a Russian motorcyclist hitting Bakhmut on the Bakhmut front. So this hitting a mine on the Bakhmut front. This is no doubt somewhere around Chasiv Yar, and having a little bit of a bad time about it. And this is fairly catastrophic for the motorcycle. I won't show it to you, but all of these are linked in the description to the video below. But I thought that was notable because it does answer a question that I've been asking. Right, we have some air losses for both sides. So although this started off as good news for the Ukrainians yesterday, actually the Ukrainians had, I don't know whether it happened yesterday or was just brought out in answer to this, but there was a very bad incident for the Ukrainian Air Force. But we'll go to this first. So Donetsk region, another Su-25 shot down in the Avdiivka direction. We have seen a number of these, and that suggests that the Ukrainians do have air defense munitions stocking their, I don't know what it is, whether it's manpads or larger air defense units, air defense systems nearer the front line. This is really good news. The Ukrainians have been desperate to get more effective in their defense of the airspace, particularly around Chasiv Yar and Avdiivka, where the Russians have been employing airframes for close air support, just basically flying overhead. You're thinking all you need is a manpad and that bad boy's going down, or several of them, at once. So it has been a real challenge for the Ukrainians. The use of the guided glide bombs is still really problematic for the Ukrainians. So that is really good news. The Russians have had a pretty bad week, really. They've lost supposedly 3 in a week. And that's exactly what the Ukrainians would want. But then we have this. This is the second time this has happened. And this is not good. Russian forces have once again struck a forward helicopter landing and resupply site operated by the Ukrainian Armed Forces in the Zaporizhia region, this time utilizing a 9K-720 Iskander-M short-range ballistic missile, with the strike appearing to cause a total destruction of one M8 HIP transport strike helicopter, one Mi-24 Hind attack helicopter, one fuel truck, and at least 12 Ukrainian service members. 2 other Mi-24s and a fuel truck can also be seen in the field adjacent to where the missile impacted, with them possibly suffering damage. There are different claims about which helicopters suffered damage or were destroyed here, but the point is, this has happened before, and the Ukrainians haven't learnt. Why you would keep helicopters close enough to each other that they can be destroyed by one single missile is beyond me. This should be absolutely clear for all kind of forward operating bases like this. You cannot do that. It might be a ball ache if you've got to go over there, then you've got to go over there to resupply, but you're going to lose helicopters if you don't do that. Like, this is not good enough. As Jakub Janovsky rightly says, people in charge of the Ukrainian Air Force should be kicked out for not enforcing proper dispersion so that a single hit doesn't destroy more than one airframe. Absolutely right. War Vehicle Tracker says, yes, it happened again, this time worse, if you want to say so. Russian forces hit and destroyed 2 Ukrainian Mi-24 attack helicopters, standing at a resupply. So he reckons 2 Mi-24s, not one Mi-24. Standing at a resupply and refuel point in the open field, along with a Mi-8 at the back. Unlikely it was affected, but using a D-30 SM UMPB bomb, in my opinion. So rather than... we had OSINT Defender saying it was a ballistic missile. We have a guided glide bomb being the culprit here for War Vehicle Tracker. I don't know which it was. Time sensitive. I don't know how quickly they can get Iskanders on the go. It might well be a guided glide bomb. Who knows? But the point is that Ukraine should have learned from the last time this happened. And they clearly haven't. And that is not good enough, because it's not just the airframes, it's the experienced crew members as well that appear to have perished in this attack. And that is that's an absolute shocker for the Ukrainians. Right, a destroyed Bogdana in a Kharkiv direction. This is a Ukrainian-made self-propelled gun that is being made. Is it 10 a month being made at the moment? So it's really good that they've ramped up production of this for all sorts of reasons. It's a fairly capable gun. There were some issues with some of the early prototypes, and I think they fixed those issues now. But this is obviously not good news. Ukrainians have lost this, but I guess it does signify that they are using them more, and they're using them more because they're making them and they need them, and so. There is that, but not good news that the Russians have been able to take one of those out. Then we've got a video here that I can't really show you, but what I thought was interesting about this, so Jay in Kiev says, and it's quite rhetorical, these are human beings, remember, Russian meat waves against Ukrainian drone waves. Absolutely brutal scene in which Russians advancing along a road get picked off one by one with precision drone strikes. One decides it's too much and suicides with a grenade. I blurred out the naughty bits. So this is a pretty horrible video. If you want to go and watch it, knock yourself out. But when I'm watching stuff like that, it's not about glorifying the death of enemy troops or anything, but it's always about, for me anyway, it's always about, what does this tell me? Is there any interest in this that is to do with, the warfare and what's going on? And what I found here that was interesting is I'm pretty sure that the Ukrainians are using more than one drone to kill each person. In other words, the rate of drone usage on these people in this tree line is more than 1 to 1. Brilliant. Thanks for that. Well done, me. But in music, I just want to show you this small. So it's a small tree line, and you've got something like I don't know, probably 5 people in there, and you've got more than 5 drones used to take them all out. And I just find that interesting in terms of, and I've said this before actually some time ago, that they appear to be using 1 to 1. They are happy to use drones to take out individual people, which tells you that the drones are plentiful. I mean, it really does. It shows that the Ukrainians have enough drones, enough FPV drones. If you are using them to take out individual people, these are essentially individual assassination tools, and that no one is safe. And goodness me, if I was one of those Russian soldiers and just hearing the sound of those, Konstantin, I think, was talking about this again in the live stream, Andrew Perpetua's live stream, just the sound of these drones around. Yeah, goodness me. I'm sure if you survived this war, hearing that kind of sound again would give you, flashbacks, PTSD, all sorts. Just that their drones are so plentiful, and I suppose that kind of size of drone, it's never going to be able to take out 5 or 6 troops, but they will happily use them against individual soldiers, and yeah, I guess, it shows that they are that plentiful. Russia on fire here. Warehouses on fire in the Moscow region. It's reported to be the Institute of Mineral Resources in Naro-Fominsk. No immediate connection to the war. Who knows? But it's another significant fire in Moscow area. These are 10 a penny at the moment. It's quite incredible. Now, we're going to go on to distant strikes. Relatively quiet night, apart from Rostov, there appears to be an explosion there. Don't know what that was about. Who knows? But Rostov is a city. So I keep reminding you, you've got Black Sea, and at the top you've got Crimea. And to the right of Crimea, you've got a little bit of the Black Sea called the Sea of Azov, on which Mariupol and Berdyansk sit. And if you go along there, you get into Russia, and you get Taganrog, and you get Rostov-on-Don in the Rostov Oblast. So this is Rostov, I presume the city of Rostov, and we have an explosion hitting there. And then we have, this is much more significant, this is a Volgograd oil refinery being attacked by drones. Again, huge fires there. This was attacked previously in February, so we're starting to see refineries that are still operating that have been previously attacked or been fixed up, then being hit again. And we are seeing a refinery a night being hit at the moment by the Ukrainians. So where the Russians are doing a really good job of taking out the Ukrainian energy infrastructure, the Ukrainians are doing a very good job of taking out the Russian oil infrastructure and the hydrocarbons there. So yeah, big explosions there at Volgograd, it appears. Ukrainian drones struck the Lukoil Volgograd Neft Pererobotka refinery. I mean, it's almost like reading Welsh. I mean, what's the point of having that long a word? Just, split it up, make it easier. Anyway, they've hit that refinery in the Volgograd region. According to the local media, after the strike, a fire broke out. The refinery is around 500 kilometers from the current front line. And it was already struck back in February the 3rd. Let's see if there's a geolocation here. Is that where it is? Must be. Yeah, Volgograd. Yeah, there. So pretty much, straight right through Luhansk Oblast, going in that direction. Right, now this is an interesting bit of news. Okay, so first of all, what are we talking about? We're talking about Belgorod, just north of the Ukrainian border, north of Kharkiv. We have a massive part of a building collapsing after an explosion, I was going to say. So that's what it looks like there. So the question is, what's happened? This is really, really a significant explosion. Okay. So local governor, city of Belgorod, was allegedly shelled by the Ukrainian army as a result of direct shell hit on the apartment building. The entire entrance from the 10th to the first floor collapsed, he stated. Right, there's some pretty incredible footage about this that you can go and look at. Right. What we are going to look at is this. So, a residential building in the Russian city of Belgorod appears to have been blown up. The Ukrainian Centre for Prevention of Disinformation. Quote, the video from the camera does not show falling objects. It looks quite like a Russian provocation to justify further strikes on residential buildings in Ukrainian cities. And I am not one that likes conspiracy theories, because they're almost always the least probable explanation of events. They're just highly unlikely. And so therefore, if you are to be justified in believing in a conspiracy theory, you should have a higher level of evidence to overcome the low prior probability. Anyway, whatever. Point being that you shouldn't believe stuff just because they're like, ooh, that's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy, so therefore you're less justified in believing it. Anyway, so is this some kind of false flag operation, which, they happen on both sides, I'm sure. But, you shouldn't just believe it. Well, the evidence here looks pretty convincing to me. Now, you got to, that this was a false flag operation. So you got to remember this is on the angle. If we look at the explosion that's caught on CCTV here, you have, and we'll go and look at this quite a few times. There's the explosion, and then the building collapses, or part of the building collapses. That's pretty incredible. And it does look like the explosion is going sort of more to the right, but then you've got to remember the image is rotated. Now let's look at this in a close-up. So Jay in Kiev presents a close-up of this, zoomed into the point of it exploding. Let's look at that again. So there is no, if you look at the left of the screen, there is no evidence of anything hitting from the air. There's no missile, there's no projectile that comes in. It just explodes, and it explodes out. That is an explosion going outwards. The fire is coming outwards. There's no impact going in and then explosions coming out. That is all going outwards. Someone's actually done another one here, which I think is really useful, and they rewind it. So if we look at this again, no missile hitting, no shell hitting. It's merely an explosion out, and then it collapses. And the reason why the explosion is going that way is not because a missile is coming down or anything like that. It's the explosion out of the building. So for me, that is a very clear explosion taking place from within the building. And, Belgorod air defense question mark? No, I don't think it's anything to do with air defense. So then we have these Russian chats going on. Explosion from the basement at exactly 11:21, says one Russian. The fuse was used without installation for seconds. Don't know what that means. Gladcom, Dan, the FSB checked the house recently. There were definitely no explosives there. Yes, I'm teething, I swear by my mother. This is fascinating, and this takes us back to Ryazan 1999. Okay, so the FSB had been to that building and checked it for explosives, and then a little bit later, it explodes. Maybe you weren't checking for explosives, maybe you were setting explosives. Anyway, someone says, damn it, reminds me of Ryazan Sugar, which is exactly what I just mentioned, 1999. The inauguration has passed. It can be anything. The main thing is the same handwriting. Not quite sure what's meant there. Okay, so what happened in 1999? Well, you had a building in Ryazan that was blown up, killing 300 people, injuring 1,000 people. And there is a lot of argument to and fro here. The Russians obviously trying to defend themselves against... You had a number of FSB agents who were arrested by local police. And then the idea that they were doing a training bomb, and then it was the reason why sugar's mentioned is because there was powder seen that they were claiming as sugar, but it was likely hexogen, so on and so forth. The point is that this was a false flag operation, according to many analysts, from Vladimir Putin that triggered the start of the Second Chechen War. So they blamed Islamic fundamentalists, it triggered the Second Chechen War, they won that, and Putin's like, yeah, thank you very much. And that's the start of him sort of going towards this, reclaiming the old Soviet Empire, if you like. And go and read the Wikipedia page on the 1999 Russian apartment bombings. There's an awful lot of ink's been spilt about this. But again, I would think the probability is that it was the Russians what did it. Interesting freedom of information request by the US government on this. The CIA refused to acknowledge any existence of any of the relevant records on this. The State Department did respond with a redacted copy of a cable from the US Embassy in Moscow. According to the cable, on March 24, 2000, a former member of Russian intelligence service told a US diplomat that the real story about the Ryazan incident could never be known because it, quote, would destroy the country. The informant said the FSB had, quote, a specially trained team of men whose mission was, quote, to carry out this type of urban warfare. The informant has also said that Viktor Cherkasov, the FSB's first deputy director and interrogator of Soviet dissidents, was, quote, exactly the right person to order and carry out such actions. So on and so forth. So, that's just a little bit of extra evidence to throw in that. I mean, you can go and look at exactly what happened around the time. It was incredibly dodgy. All the information about that is, very suspicious, and it really does point towards that being a false flag, famously a false flag action from the Russians to trigger being able to then attack Chechnya. Now, this looks like an explosion, and if that was planted rather than like a gas explosion or something like that, then this could well be an excuse to just bomb the crap out of Kharkiv, which would fit then into the attack narrative of attacking that northern border. It's like, oh, you've done that to Belgorod, have you? Right, we're going to absolutely slam a load of missiles directly into Kharkiv. So we'll see what turns out, what comes from this. But as far as I'm concerned, this is not an external munition hitting that building. It looks very much, unless there's other evidence that is presented, it looks very much like an explosion from within that building. Okay, sorry to spend so much time on that, but it's big news at the moment. Lots of people talking about it. Right, we are seeing here other bits and pieces. Just Russian forces entering Kharkiv region, reportedly near Streletsya. Border town is located in grey zone now under Russian occupation. Now, this is a little bit depressing because this is quite a number of troops. I would hope that these would be targetable by drones, artillery or something, but they seem to be walking fairly freely into northern Kharkiv Oblast, which is challenging. So more troops on the way there. But what is interesting here is they're walking on foot. Everything happens for a reason. And if it doesn't happen for a reason, then it's random, which is a reason in itself, because there's no thought going into it, and therefore, why would there be no thought, etc., etc. But here, why are they not using equipment to walk fairly decent distances to get to their objective? Is it because equipment is more vulnerable to being blown up? So they're not using optimal ways of prosecuting a mission? Is it because they don't have that equipment? What's the reason there? Okay, in Russia, we go back to Omsk region, and another dam has burst in the Ust-Ishim district this time of the Omsk region. Residents are being evacuated. Another collapsed dam and a humanitarian catastrophe in the country that spends its budget on killing its neighbours and threatening the whole world. So that has happened. And then we have this, this is depressing. Okay, Russians have flocked to Mariupol seeking bargains as Putin's local gangster puppets sell off the homes and assets of 120,000 people Russia murdered there. So there is, although there's a good deal of rhetoric as ever with what Jane Kiev says, this is definitely happening at the moment. So Russians are seeking to get really cheap properties in places like Mariupol where Ukrainians have fled or been killed. And the properties, if they're not claimed within a certain amount of time, which is obviously they're not going to be, then the Russians are basically stealing them and then selling them off cheap for Russians. So today, Russians held a PR rally, so it was yesterday, in front of the Mariupol Drama Theatre, where 700 women, children and elderly were massacred. You remember the place where they had written in white children outside? And that was blown up. Now everyone's happy that they're all going to have money. And this is, I find this quite sickening, this kind of video.
Друзья, всем привет, Мариуполь! Мариуполь! Да, 24-й год. Поехали мы, поперли! Друзья, всем привет, Мариуполь!
So they're all happy that they're going to be picking up cheap apartments, which is all kind of based on war crimes. And then, goodness, what is happening here? As Anton Goshenko says, I don't even know how to comment on this. So this is someone who's very pro-Russian. Just what are you doing? Honestly, what are you doing? You absolute numbnut. And that's all I have to say. I'm going to leave it with that. In fact, I might make that bigger for you just to what's going on there? Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate your support. I need to tell you actually that today I have a couple of lives. So I'm going to be talking to Mark and Olena, who are based in Canada, and they're going to talk to me about anything to do with the war. I went and saw Olena's mother in Sienivka in the Kherson Oblast when I was over in Ukraine. So we're going to be talking about stuff like that, about their experiences still 2 years into the war, about the Canadian Ukrainian diaspora, and so on and so forth, what their feelings of things are. So yeah, check that out. And I'm also appearing on Touchneed tonight on their live stream. About an hour into it, I'll turn up to about 8 o'clock UK time. And then the beginning they have like a set news bit, but if you've watched my stuff, like that is kind of the same sort of news stuff. But obviously, by all means, pop into Tochny. It's not just about me. But I'll be on at about 8 o'clock UK time. So yeah, come and check that out and give them some love. In the meantime, I will get on with my usual output. My family have gone to Poultons Park today for a bit of a nice day out. I'm staying at home because I don't think my legs would take that. So there you go. Anyway, I'll get on and give you the rest of my stuff. Toodle pips.